in jail. And, when you're in jail, you do all types of stuff to occupy your time. And I am not necessarily a religious man, but let me tell you, when it gets me off the block, I'm going to church.
Right.
So I can't. Brother Love was his name. He came into Lehigh County Jail all the time, and he came in one day, and he was telling me about love. He was like, "Do you know what the word love means?" And I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Well, who do you love?" And I was like, "I love my kids. I love my mom. I love my brother." He was like, "The fuck you do? You love heroin."
Brother Love was the only time I ever considered hitting an 80-year-old man.
Yo. Oh.
When he asked me who I loved, and I said I love my kids,
he gave you the same speech?
And he says, "No, you don't." I said, "Who are you to tell me I don't love my kids?" He says, "If you loved your kids, you wouldn't be out there fucking up, doing heroin, and ended up in jail."
Right, and he explained, but now, all right, now that sounds so harsh when you're just hearing it from the outside.
Right.
But let me explain what this man meant when he said this. Now, love is an action word. Love is something that you do to someone. You show somebody love. You show somebody that. You do things. You show them love. That is a verb. It is an action word. If you are out there showing something else love, you're not able to love them.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it took a lot for him to explain that to me and for it to get through my head and to get past all that anger. Because let me tell you, I was just like, I'm ready to punch this old man in the head.
I was sitting there thinking in the back of my head, man, I ain't never stuffed an old guy in a toilet, but it's about to happen.
So what we're going to do here today is each of us, we're going to let you know who we are. Tell you a little bit about where we came from and what brought us to the point where we're at now. What's up, guys?
What's going on, fellas? What we want to pretty much do is just talk a little bit about ourselves, because that's what kind of we do here around here.
Is your mic not on?
Let's talk a little bit about who we are, and if you guys have any questions for each other or in the process, then we'll just answer questions, I guess. But
I'm with it.
If you want to start, Nick.
Oh, do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Well, West Philadelphia, born in So I don't know. We were talking earlier about family, right? And family plays a big part in my story because I come from a family of addicts. Like, I grew up in the environment of lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, get around, use the system, use the drugs. Life is one big party, so let's just fucking do it, right? That's exactly how I grew up. I wasn't taught growing up what it meant to be a provider. I didn't grow up learning to work for what I needed or wanted. My end goal was to take it, steal it, or get somebody else to do it for me. And that was the type of life I lived for a very long time. I remember when I was probably about 13 years old, and I was smoking a joint with my uncle, right? And my uncle looks at me and he says, "You know what, Nick?" He says, just go ahead and buckle up now and get ready for a lifetime of fucking misery, because that's all this family is one big fucking misery. And at the time, like, I sat back and I looked and I was like, you know what? I've got 2 uncles in jail. I've got cousins using and drinking all the time. And I remember, like, one of my older cousins that I kind of idolized as growing up. I remember when he was like 15 years old going to rehab already, And that was exactly what we had going on. And for a long time, I resigned to the fact that was going to be my life. I was going to struggle.
Sounds familiar.
And I was going to fucking be in pain and misery for a very long time. And that's how I lived my life for a long time, man. I went in and out. And, like, up until, I would say, my early 20s, I just, like, dibbled and dabbled with different things, like, I would smoke weed for a little bit and then I would stop. I would drink for a little bit and then I would stop. Do a couple lines and then I would stop. Just to, experiment, I guess you could say, And then when I was probably, I guess I would say I was about in my early 20s. I would say like 21, 22 years old. That's when things took a different turn. I started getting into, you know, the opioids and the painkillers and the Xanax and the pills. And for some reason, when I started popping pills, like, things just made sense to me at that moment. Like, that was my thing. I have arrived. This is going to get me through the rest of my life. And that's how I felt when it came to opiates, man. Like, I thought that was going to be my ride.
Yeah, life just got better.
Right. It was going to be my ride till the end. You know what I'm saying? And it came close to that a couple times where it was going to be the end.
Is that the only thing you've done is opiates?
Oh, no. I've done most drugs under the sun. Like I said, I had a very experimental phase. I've done ecstasy. I've done cocaine. I've done crack. And I firmly believe this too. Like I had once I'd started using heroin, especially with an IV, I started putting other things into the needle too to see how it felt, because when I snorted heroin and when I shot heroin, it was a completely different effect. You know, so the first time I shot cocaine, that was a life-changing event for me. You know, and I still kind of believe this to today. If I would have shot cocaine before I shot heroin, I probably would have never done heroin. You know, but then it would still have been the same outcome.
You'd
you
just
know,
been a little lighter.
I would have just been
that's
chasing. I would have just been chasing.
What started you doing that initial heroin injection?
It was a progression, man. I was on painkillers for a very long time, prescribed them to start with, and then I was hooked on them. I couldn't deal with. First of all, the first time I went through withdrawal, I didn't even know what the fuck it was. You know that. I seriously felt like I had the flu. You know what I'm saying? The sweats, the shakes, the fevers, like, it just sucked. Like, I just thought I was sick. And turns out I was sick, but not because I had the flu.
Yeah.
And then I realized, like, if I'm going to do this again, if I want to feel good from taking these pills again, I'm going to have to keep taking them, because I'm not going to deal with that again. Fuck that, right? So then I spent the next, like, fucking 6 years trying to not feel that way. And then, like, as things got worse for doctors prescribing medications, it got harder to get the pills. I went to the next thing, which was ultimately cheaper to start off with, but it got more expensive as my tolerance grew.
Damn sure does.
You know what I'm saying? But, like, it was more readily available than trying to buy pills every day. You know, so that was like the segue into heroin. That was what. I couldn't get the pills anymore, and I still needed to have something because I didn't want to feel that withdrawal, you know.
You were an unfortunate victim of that pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, and it was, man. So, like, I ended up in the hospital a couple times back to back. I had these kidney stones. Every time I went to the ER, you know, they would give me give me a shot of, like, morphine or Dilaudid. They would give me, like, either an X-ray or a CAT scan to see, like, where the stones were, and then they'd be like, okay, well, call this guy. He's a urologist. He specializes in this thing. And here's a prescription of, like, Vicodin or Percocet or something. You can go ahead and go home now.
That's the problem, is they all they do is just prescribe.
Right. And that's exactly what they did. They gave me a bunch of pills and told me to drink a lot of water, and that was that, you know.
And the bad part about that is now is a lot of insurance companies won't even cover Percocet prescription. They won't even pay for it until it's actually, like, backed up by a doctor and you have, like, a history.
Right.
You can't just go to the doctor for a toothache and get some prescription Percocets because they want to know the history.
Right. And that's how it should have been from the start, because I tell you what, if I went to one ER and they didn't give me what I wanted, I would go to the next ER, or I would call my regular doctor, because sporadically throughout my life I had a regular doctor. I never was able to maintain insurance for very long, so keeping a regular doctor wasn't really an option. But when I did have one, I would just call them, and they would prescribe it. You know, so, like, they used to call that doctor shopping, I think is what they used to call it. So,
you can't, like, do that anymore. Like,
no, you can't.
They have a system where your name shows up, but, like, oh, he was just here at this place.
Yeah,
you'll red flag real quick. So
right.
They stopped all that. So
for the people that were doing the pills, the next progression was to get the heroin, because you didn't have to go through a doctor, right? You didn't have to get any kind of prior authorization to be able to take these pain pills anymore, and you got the same effect, if not the better effect, from taking the heroin.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And what's that saying that people they say addiction is a disease, or no, it's not a disease, like. Cancer is a disease.
All right.
What's your outlook on that?
Right. So real quick, let me clear that up. By definition, a disease is anything that affects the body in a way that it makes it so that it does not function properly. Addiction affects the brain so that the pleasure center of the brain no longer functions properly. It seeks outside services to get the pleasure center functioning. Okay? So
addiction
by
is not a disease.
by definition, it is a disease.
Okay.
By definition, it is a disease. However, when people think disease, they think cancer or
You can't help getting cancer.
Right, you can't help getting cancer. You can help getting addiction. When
Yes.
Okay, so in the beginning, it is a choice. It is a choice, but that choice changes the wiring of your brain. So that is where that comes from. It technically by definition, by the Webster's dictionary definition, it is a disease.
So in simple terms, I do have a choice to pick up a drug, right? Just like I can choose to pick up my phone off this desk right now, right? But what makes it a disease in my mind, from my perspective, is what happens after I made that choice. So after I make that choice, all bets are off and all rational thought process goes out the window. That's what changes it for me. So as long as I'm doing something to make better choices in my life, I can temporarily alleviate the symptoms of the disease, right?
Right. Now, did you do medical assisted treatment at all or anything like that? Or was it all did you just do meetings? Like, what was your process with getting clean?
The first time around that I went through treatment, I tried the Suboxone maintenance program. All that really did for me, because I wasn't following through with what they wanted me to do. So, like, I didn't do the counseling sessions and the outpatient therapy they wanted me to do along with taking the prescription. So it didn't really work for me. I ended up selling off my prescription and pretty much using other drugs because they have a blocker in there, so opiates don't really work on your system for a little bit until it gets out of your system, right? So I tried with other things. This time around, Vivitrol was offered to me, but by the time it was offered to me, I had already had like 9 months clean because I spent that time in jail. So I didn't really think that it was necessary for me to do that. And I think for me, the reason why I've been quote unquote successful to this point is because I went through long-term treatment. I stayed engaged in a treatment process. You know, I did like a 90-day stay at a TC, a therapeutic community. And then from there, I went to a halfway house, which was like another 90-day program that kept me involved in treatment. And then even after the halfway house, I did an intensive outpatient program, you know, which led me to my start in a 12-step fellowship. My initial freedom came from treatment. My follow-up freedom came from the 12 steps that I was working on. Now I've gotten to a point where I still attend a 12-step fellowship from time to time. I have a home group commitment that I like to keep. It just keeps me accountable, right? But for the most part, I tried many different things now. Like, I've done a little bit of smart recovery. I attend these journaling groups that have been really therapeutic for me personally. And I just like to find newer hobbies to do. Like, I have found or rediscovered a love for cooking. I mean, I like to eat food, so why not learn how to make the food? And now I try different recipes.
Any of you listeners out there that are hearing him talking about journaling, if you're in the beginning of sobriety or you really don't know anything about it and you're hearing him talk about journaling, you're like, man, writing down everything, it's the most therapeutic, most helpful thing you could possibly do. And I recommend that for everyone because you can learn so much about yourself just by writing your thoughts down and going back over your thought process. It's just so amazing.
And I think that's part of what I like about it. So, like, typically I have a hard time getting close to people and divulging, like, personal information about myself, you know, on a deep level. Like, I don't mind telling my story, but, like, when I'm struggling with something, it's hard for me to communicate that. So journaling has become a tool for me to get whatever thoughts are scrambling around in my head, just to get them out of my head for a few minutes. It gives me a chance to write them down. It's made the thoughts tangible and gives me an idea of, like, what my next step needs to be.
Yeah, I hear that. That's when I was doing my journaling, that it was just constantly going back over, reading everything over, analyzing, well, like, okay, I felt this way. all right, well, why did I feel this way? You know, what was my thought process about what this person did that made me feel this way? You know, and how can I change that? I focus so much on trying to change my perspective. Like, I have that firm belief that perspective is everything.
Absolutely.